If you use temp labor, you hire an agency, tradesman, trades labor, whatever. Temp labor, the claim side of this equation, the workers' compensation claim, goes to the company you got the labor from. You are responsible for the recordable incident if you're directing the outcome of that labor. Okay. So where this gets differentiated is subcontractors. There are, and they're rare, but there are circumstances to where you may hire temp labor, but directly, hmm, you're not directly directing. That's hard, poor choice of words, but you get what I'm saying there. If you're not directing the labor in person, um, that turns into a subcontractor relationship, and you're not responsible for the recordable. The circumstances that I've heard of popped up this before that explain this would be, I'm hiring 5 people to clean up the job site. My workforce, I need to move it to the next job site, but I'm turning over the keys to ownership, and I need you guys to come in and polish up the job site, sweep it, clean it up. I'm handing keys over today, but I'm not going to be there. That turns into more of a subcontractor relationship, and you wouldn't be recordable. But if you're hiring this labor and you have supervisors on site directing their output, that you are responsible for the OSHA documentation if they are injured. Again, you are not responsible for the claim. Okay. And we'll get into this later, but please account for those hours. Remember, we talked about on that summary, total hours worked up by all employees. You want to make sure you account for those hours. So at the end of the year, you should be able to go to whatever agency you got the labor from, and you should be able to say, how many hours did we have from you this year? And put that on your summary. And I'll show you why that's important when we start talking about incident rates. So now we know the rules. Now we know what and what is not a recordable. Now let's show you how to fill out your log. This is where a lot of mistakes are made, so we're going to spend some time on this piece of paper right here. Okay, columns A through F are the personal information of this line entry of a recordable incident. So column A, this is just best practice. I just recommend this to the members I work with. And I know I said that a claim and a recordable are not related, but the reality is if you are putting something on your log, 99.9 times out of 100, they probably sought medical attention, which means there's a claim number. So my recommendation, and this isn't a law, this is not something that you have to do, it's just a recommendation. My recommendation is you put the claim number in column A, solely for it's another place to cross-reference information. So most employers I work with, I'd say just put the claim number in column A, employee's name in column B. And remember, this is not a public document. This is internal, so nobody sees this except you and eyes above you. Now, you may get a request for this documentation from a GC, from a general contractor, or from an ownership group that you're working on with a project. You can redact the personal information on this document. You can black out or delete before you send it column A if it's a claim number, column B the employee's name. It does not have to have that personal information on there. Okay, but they have every right to ask you for this if they want to figure out whether or not you're going to do business together. So, but you can redact information on column A and column B. Column C is your job title. It's what you give them at your place of business. Date, which is month and day in column D. E, again, event, where it occurred, which is either an address or a project name, doesn't matter. And then column F, again, simple sentence fragment, where we're going to spend a lot of time is defining the do's and the don'ts in columns G, H, I, J, K, L, and 1 through 6. Okay, remember this is not a public document, so there are circumstances where you could put privacy case in column B. If the injury is sensitive in nature for any reason because it would happen to an intimate body part, or the recordable is due to sexual assault or HIV infection, or the employee just doesn't want their name on anything, it is totally fine to put privacy case right there in column B. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, this is not a public document. This does not get posted. Nobody sees this. And if you do get a request for this document um, from another entity like a general contractor, an ownership group, you can redact the personal information off this document. Okay. When we talk about columns G through 6, let's talk about GHIJ. You're only going to put an X, is in a classification, literally an X, in one of those, I'm going to say 3 boxes because we're not going to deal with column G. H, I, or J. Okay. H is any recordable that results in missed work. Okay. And we'll go through the rules here in a second, but that does not include the day of the incident. The clock starts ticking at the next scheduled shift. Okay. So if I only miss 1 day of work, but I have 3 weeks of light duty, I'm still going to classify this as days away from work. That's classifying the case. Excuse me, if I'm back to work the next day, but I have modified duty, i.e. light duty, I'm going to classify that case as I, job transfer or restriction. Okay. If I'm back to work the next day with no restrictions, meaning I'm doing my normal functions, my everyday job, but I hit one of those other circumstances, the general recording criteria, I have a fractured or cracked bone, not serious. I had a prescription, antibiotic ointment for my eye. If I had stitches, but I'm back to work the next day, I have no restrictions, I'm going to classify that in column J. The only 2 places I could put numbers is columns K and or L, depending on the circumstances. We'll go to that in a second. So the only 2 places I will have numbers would be in K and L, depending on my incident. And then I'm going to classify that as an injury or an illness. So again, 90% of the time, I'm going to put an X in column 1, but there's 5 categories there of illnesses: skin disorder, respiratory condition, poisoning, hearing loss, all other illnesses. There may be a circumstance where I check one of those other 5 boxes. So every line entry will have 2 X's, one in H, I, or J, and then one in 1 through 6, and then maybe or maybe not, depending on the circumstance, numbers in columns K and L. And we'll go through plenty of examples to illustrate this. Okay, when we're talking about columns K and L, there's 4 rules to remember. We already talked about the first one, which is you do not count the day of the incident, regardless of when it happened during the day. If they get hurt at 8 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, doesn't matter. We don't start counting either days missed or restricted work activity, light duty days, until the next scheduled shift. Okay, and I use that term next scheduled shift for a reason, because if I am hurt, if my injury happened on a Friday and I'm not scheduled until the next Monday, I didn't miss any days. Okay, which brings us to the second rule. We count calendar days. So if the injury happens on a Thursday and I miss my shift on Friday and I come back on Monday, technically I've missed 3 days because we count calendar days. Now, why do we do this? Because different companies, different trades have different work schedules, and this was just OSHA's way of just standardizing the playing field. We count calendar days, we count holidays, we count weekends, we count everything, not just Monday through Friday or Tuesday through Saturday or Monday through Thursday, depending on how you work. We count every day, but we don't start counting until the next scheduled shift. And then we count every calendar day after that until they're either back at work or they're back at light duty, what have you. Okay, and we'll go into that detail a little bit more. If the incident involved both missed work days and light duty days, we enter the total number of days for each. Again, using the calendar rule, calendar days for each, but we can stop counting once we reach 180 for either column K or L. So K is the number of days missed, L is the number of light duty days. If we hit 180 in either K or L or a combination of 2, we stop counting. Okay, they just say you're done. You don't need to count past 180. The fourth rule is all these numbers associated with either light duty or missed work go back to the date of injury. Okay, and what I mean by that is if your log entry is due to an incident that happened on December 30th, you would have a log entry, and let's just say that happened last month in 2025, and you have 2025 documentation, You have no responsibilities on your 2026 log or your 2026 summary, even though we're still counting missed days and light duty work and et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So you would never have a log entry for the same injury in 2 consecutive years. It all goes back to that date of injury, that calendar date of injury, and what year that happened in. And that's where all that documentation would reside. Okay. Now, that brings up the question, well, what do I do when my summaries due? What do I do when I need to do the injury tracking application, do my electronic reporting? Just to the best of your ability. You don't need to speculate. You say, at this moment in time, when I'm posting my summary, this injury resulted in 3 weeks of missed work, and at this moment in time, 12 days of light duty, whatever it is. Just enter it. At some point, you can go back and correct it. Don't worry about submitting any new information to OSHA as far as the number of days missed or the number of light duty days through the injury tracking application. It's just in that moment in time when you're submitting your summary or going through the electronic submission through OSHA, where are you at right now? How many days have missed? How many days of light duty have been worked? Enter it. Don't worry about it. Injuries versus illnesses. This is kind of simple, but an injury is what, shoot, my kids would have described. It's what we think of in vernacular. You know, it's a wound, it's a cut, a puncture, laceration, abrasion, et cetera, et cetera. It's what you would think of if you just said the word injury. In illness, and again, you don't need to remember these, but again, you're going to have the slide deck, so you can refer back to it. But these 5 bullet points, refer back to those 5 bullet points right here in columns 2 through 6. Skin disease, respiratory condition, poisoning, hearing loss, all other. Okay, so skin disease, respiratory conditions that's usually associated with breathing hazardous biological agents. Poisoning, this refers more to that chemical toxic substance that enters the bloodstream, because when we talk about bloodborne pathogenic diseases, that's at the very bottom. That falls into all other occupational illnesses that include also heat stroke, freezing, frostbite, et cetera, et cetera. So it's rare, but unfortunately, we see this now and again. We talked about that needle stick example. If that needle came back as in the bloodborne pathogen was positive, and I do have a disease, a bloodborne pathogenic disease because of that needle stick, then I would classify that as an illness, not an injury. Hopefully, knock on wood, we don't see that very often, but poisoning, other, this happens primarily in other industries, but every now and then we see this, with this toxic substance thing. The fourth one there, hearing loss, we mentioned that earlier, a change in hearing threshold relative to the baseline audiogram. That is an illness, not an injury. But those are your 5 categories of illness that correspond to categories 2 through 6. Okay, so let's just illustrate the point of H, I, and J here. So I just focused in on this one portion of your log. If I'm going to classify my injury, my incident, as column H, days away from work, I have to have a number in column K. Okay, let that sink in for a second. If I'm going to put an X in column H, I have to have a number in column K because I have missed at least one day away from work. I may or may not have a number in column L. And what I mean by that is that when I come back to work, am I coming back to light duty work, or am I coming back to a full duty release? If I come back to a full duty release after missing work, I have a 0. If I miss some work and then come back to light duty, then I enter the number of light duty days with those same rules that apply. Okay, calendar days. Okay, so if I put an X in column H, I will have a number in column K, and I may or may not have a number in column L. Okay, let's go to the next one. If I put an X in column I, okay, job, transfer, or restriction, that means I am back to work the next scheduled shift, but I have restrictions. So I can't have a number in column K because I'm back to work the next scheduled shift with restrictions. And then you enter the number of days in column L. So if I put an X in column I, I will have a 0 in column K, and I have to have a number in column L. Okay. Last one is if I put an X in column J, I can't, by default, I cannot have a number in column K or L because that means my injury was was not significant, relatively speaking. I'm back to work the next day and I have zero restrictions. That's that circumstance I mentioned earlier. This usually see this when you have a prescription or a cut. Okay, I had a cut that needed to be closed with sutures, not serious, but I'm back to work the next day. I have no restrictions. I can do my normal duties. That's how that would look in your entry. And then again, the corresponding injury or illness if applicable. Okay. But where I usually see mistakes when when I'm reviewing your log at the end of the year is a lot of members will put an X in column H and I because they have numbers in K or L. Remember, you only check one box in H, I, or J. Okay. The other mistake I see is that they'll put an X in whatever column has the greater number, the corresponding column to K or L. So if I have a 5 in column K, which is 5 days of missed work, and I have a 13 in column L, which is the number of light duty days, a lot of employers will put the X in column I because 13 is greater than 5. Even if I only miss 1 day of work, I have to classify that case as missed work. Okay. So now when I do this in a classroom setting and you guys have some attachments that Alex sent you, I usually have you guys fill these out. We'll just go through these verbally. I'm not going to make, pause and have you write this stuff down. But if you do have, if you have the log in front of you, it'll help you a little bit. But let's just kind of go through these verbally. So these are scenarios and illustrate some of those rules on how to fill out the log. We're going to go through with some of these scenarios and show you what the log should look like after you fill it out. So I have a company and a project, and I have a framer named Jason Stein. On Thursday, January 4th, while installing stairs, he cut his right forearm on an exposed nail. He was taken to the nearest clinic where he received a tetanus shot and 8 stitches. He was back to work the next day with no restrictions. So I'm not going to call on you, but I need somebody to just, do I have a recordable here? Yes or no?
Yes,
Okay, why?
because he received a shot, even though it was still medical treatment.
Stitches.
Correct. Josh is right. It is stitches. The tetanus shot, if I go back, and this is why I want to send you guys that second bullet point right there, administering tetanus immunizations, not recordable. That's first aid. So the tetanus shot is no, the stitches is yes. So the only thing that makes this a recordable is the stitches. If I change the scenario to where he received a tetanus shot and they closed the wound with steri strips and butterfly bandages, not a recordable because that's first aid treatment. But the tetanus shot is considered first aid. The stitches are considered beyond first aids. The only thing that makes this a recordable are the stitches. So what does that look like? Well, he's back to work the next day with no restrictions. So I know I can't classify that at H. I know I don't classify that in I. So I put an X in J, zeros in K and L. Again, by default, I can't have numbers if I'm going to classify the case in column J. And it's an injury. And you see all the other stuff there on the left side, very basic. I didn't put down claim number, but here again, I would put down the claim number. Jason Stein, framer, January 4th, Amazonia warehouse, cut right arm on exposed nail. Okay. Any questions on how I filled that out? All right. Next scenario. Same company, same project. I have Ty Peabody as a foreman. On Monday, April 8th, he was assisting his crew offloading materials when he threw out his lower back. He missed the remainder of the work week, which was Tuesday through Friday. He's paid KOS by the employer. We already know that KOS doesn't matter when it comes to OSHA documentation. His physician released him to full duty the following Monday. Okay. So recordable. Yes, absolutely, because we've missed work. Okay. So what does that look like? How many days? Somebody tell me how many days we're going to put in column K. Remember, the injury's on Monday. He's back to work the following 6 days. You're spot on. 100%. That's what that looks like. So we classify that into H because we have missed days. We enter 6 in column K because we count Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Okay, because we count calendar days. Back to Matt Hicks' point, yes, you count Thanksgiving, you count Christmas, you count everything. And then we classify this as an injury. Okay. Next scenario. I have a welder. Katie Burt was a welder on Tuesday, August 13th. She had a piece of welding material enter her right eye. After work that day, she went to the nearest clinic where the healthcare professional irrigated her eye, prescribed antibiotic eye drops to prevent infection, covered it with an eye patch, told her to wear it for the next 24 hours. She's back to work the next day, zero restrictions. Recordable, yes or no?
Yes, because of the prescription.
Yep. Good job.
Redemption.
What's that?
Redemption.
Right, right, right. So yes, remember, prescription, oral, topical, therapeutic, all considered recordable incidents, and whether that prescription is filled or not. If you have a guy that says, I'm not taking any Medicaid, there's that paper trail for it. You have to put it on your log. Okay. So that's what that looks like. Very similar to our first case. We're back to work the next day. We have no restrictions. We're going to classify that in J, zeros in K and L, and it's an injury. As a safety professional, we take the stance that everything's preventable. I wish that every one of you had zeros and nothing to fill out at the end of the year. But these are the types of things I could live with. They're not late making me lose sleep at night because they're back to work the next day. They don't have restrictions. It's not affecting their lives negatively on a relatively speaking basis. And it's not affecting you, the employer, with higher insurance rates or a lower retro refund or a higher EMR that makes you hard to get business. Okay. When I have a little cut and I need stitches or I have something gets in my eye and I need a prescription, but I'm back to work the next day, no restrictions, I can live with it. Okay. I'm okay with it. All right. I have an HVAC technician now on Friday, October 4th. While climbing an extension ladder, he slipped and fell 4 feet, twisting his left ankle. He missed the next week of work. He was paid KOS and was on light duty for the following 4 weeks before receiving a full duty release. A little bit of math here now. So it would happen on a Friday. Okay. Let's just assume we have a normal work pattern. So he's the next Monday. So you missed the next week of work starting that Monday. And the Monday after that, so a full week later, he started light duty. Okay. So we're going to classify this in H. We missed 7 days of work, which is Monday through Friday plus the Saturday, Sunday. So that's 7. And then we had 4 weeks of light duty. Okay. 4 weeks before receiving a full duty release. That's why we have 28. Did everybody follow that? Why we filled that out with a 7 and a 28? Cool. And again, we classify that in H, regardless of which number is greater. I just want to hit this home because I see a lot of mistakes on this. If we miss 1 day at work, I'm putting an X in column H. Okay. All right. Now just tell me recordable or not. Yes or no. Worker went to a clinic for a puncture wound. Local anesthesia was administered prior to removing a metal fragment with tweezers. This is one that actually happened pre-COVID. It's probably about 6 years now. We didn't know the answer off the top of our head. We had to look it up. Wound was then sterilized and covered before you went back to work that same day. Okay, the metal fragment was not in his eye. It was in the webbing. This is an actual case. It was in the webbing between his thumb and his finger.
No,
Recordable or not? Correct.
no.
This is not a recordable. What we looked up, we didn't know about local anesthesia. Hadn't come across that before, so I had to look this up. Turns out local anesthesia, primarily it's given to numb the area on the body so the poor man or woman doesn't scream in pain when they're digging something out of your or stitching something up. So this was a one-off because every single time I look on a medical report when I'm helping an employer and I see local anesthesia, other than this one time, because this is a puncture wound. What happened? The guy was using a nail gun, hit a really tight knot. It was a galvanized nail, it ricocheted, and he had a piece of that galvanized nail get into that meaty part of his hand, and they had to dig it out. So no stitches were needed. Every other time you see local anesthesia, it's followed by wound closure that includes stitches, staples, or medical glue. So I would say every time, other than this one circumstance, When I see local anesthesia, I usually see stitches, which equals a recordable. So this was a one-off. I had puncture wound. Didn't need to stitch anything up. Okay. All right. Worker was cut on the lower leg from a piece of sheet metal. He went to the health clinic where the wound was cleaned and closed with steri strips and dermabond, i.e. medical glue. He was back to work the next day with no restrictions. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yep. Dermabond. Medical glue equals stitches. So this is where you typically see dermabond being used, or medical glue, is when you have a very clean, acute cut, a slice, as opposed to a jagged, something that needs to be stitched. When you have a clean cut from sheet metal or a knife or a razor blade, that's when they use medical glue because stitches aren't required to keep that wound closed. So this is typically when we see medical glue. But medical glue, dermabond equals recordable. Worker hit his thumb with a hammer. He went in for an X-ray, which was negative for any fracture, so he did not fracture his bones. He was given pain meds at the clinic and instructed to take NSAIDs, which are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like naproxen, Aleve, ibuprofen, etc. Over-the-counter pain meds for the next week. He's back to work his next scheduled shift without restrictions. Yes or no?
No.
Yes,
Correct.
because of the X-ray.
What kind
Nope.
of pain meds?
Very good questions. All very good questions. Okay. The pain meds, so let me address the last one first, because that's one that comes up a lot. The pain meds that are given at the clinic do not count as a prescription. So they can actually receive Tylenol with codeine at the clinic, but that doesn't count because he's not going and filling a prescription.
I'm
So
gonna
very
say
good
no.
question there. So that is a we went to that slide, we talked about diagnostic procedures right there. Second bullet point, diagnostic procedures are not considered in and of themselves a recordable. So the X-ray does not make it a recordable. I can get an X-ray and get an MRI and get a CAT scan. It depends on the results of that diagnostic procedure whether or not have a recordable, not the procedure itself. So X-ray not recordable. So there's nothing there that makes that a recordable. NSAIDs, those over-the-counter pain meds, okay, non-prescription meds at non-prescription strength. This happened more when I first started in this job, and I recommended employers go, and I still do, but it's not as critical regarding this circumstance. But I would say 2016 to 2018, a lot of physicians were prescribing non-prescription medications at prescription strength. I don't know if they're getting kickbacks. It had to be some sort of, money in their pocket. I'm trying to say they were dirty or not, but I'm just saying that a lot of times you'd have an injured worker and they say, "You're fine, go home. I'm going to prescribe you ibuprofen 800 milligrams." Well, we were recommending employers just go with him and say, "Hey, can we," and isn't claim suppression now, but can we go and buy them a bottle at Walgreens and have them take 4 pills at 200 milligrams versus the 800 milligram pill that you're giving them in a prescription form? There's no difference. It's the same medication, but I'm taking 4 pills every 8 hours to take care of my pain as opposed to your prescription strength. It doesn't happen as much, but it's not a bad idea for you, the employer, to go with, and the employer, supervisor, somebody, a employee representative, to go with the injured worker to the clinic for a couple of reasons. One is to prevent that from happening, to ask the question, "Hey, it looks like you're prescribing Tylenol. Can I go buy a bottle of Tylenol for my employee and they can take the proper dosage that you're prescribing with an over-the-counter medication?" That helps you avoid the recordable. The other reason is, hey, my employer, this is the representative with the injured worker now, my employer offers light duty. Can you give us an idea of what the restrictions are so that we can craft a specific light duty task or light duty job for this injured worker? And you can get that ball rolling as well. So if it's feasible for you within your resources to send somebody with that injured worker to the clinic, I do recommend it for a variety of reasons. The most important being that light duty component. But every now and then you might get a doctor that thinks they need to prescribe an over-the-counter medication at a higher dosage. Makes no sense to me. But all right. Last one. Worker had lower back strain due to heavy lifting materials up a flight of stairs. He went to the clinic that prescribed chiropractic massage therapy for 2 weeks. He didn't miss any work. He was going after work every day. No restrictions. Yes or no? Recordable.
Recordable because of the chiropractic prescription.
Right. Right. This is one I missed for almost 2 years because if you go back to my slide that talks about first aid treatment, and this is straight off the OSHA website, right? This isn't stuff I put together. If you look at the second bullet point up from the bottom, it says using massages. So I thought forever, using massages, not recordable. Using massages, not recordable. Then I found out that if that massage is a prescribed massage, meaning that piece of paper is written, I want you to go see so-and-so to get massages, that makes it a recordable. So massages, just because, hey, I'm going to go get a massage to help my body, not recordable. If that massage is a prescription from the primary healthcare provider or whoever is taking care of the claim, then it is a recordable. So yes, prescription equals recordable.